Just enjoy and listen to, and have a fun of it.
Let's have fun. Story radio station Waylon.
I'm your host, Dexter, ready to jump right into some really important social issues happening right now.
And I'm Claire. It's great to be here to help unpack the deeper causes and look at the bigger picture globally. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, before we really get into it, just a quick reminder, you won't want to miss our deep dive, so please do subscribe, hit that like button, and maybe set up your notifications. It really helps us out.
Absolutely. So today we're tackling something pretty heavy, something we're seeing more and more. The fear and, frankly, hatred of foreigners in Korean society.
Exactly. Yeah, we picked this because, honestly, if you walk through places like Myeongdong or Gangnam these days, areas usually packed with tourists, you sometimes run into these, well, intense political demonstrations.
Oh, you mean the anti-North Korea or anti-China ones?
Yes, those, and some very strong pro-government kind of far-right groups, too.
Mm-hmm.
The feeling around them is just, it's brutal, really intense. It feels very politically charged, very extreme right-wing. And apparently it's quite difficult to legally stop them right now. That's a really concerning observation. And it leads right into our topic. This phenomenon, this fear or dislike of foreigners has a name, xenophobia.
Xenophobia. Right. Maybe we should quickly explain that for anyone not familiar.
Good idea. So xenophobia essentially comes from Greek words meaning fear of strangers. It's an intense, often unreasonable fear or dislike of people from other countries or anyone perceived as an outsider. It goes way beyond just simple prejudice. It's often rooted in deep fear, sometimes even hostility.
Got it. So our mission today is pretty clear then. We need to dig into the why. What are the deep structural reasons this seems to be flaring up in Korea? And importantly, what have been the consequences, like the actual national costs, when this kind of thing has taken hold elsewhere in the world?
Exactly. We're going to dissect this starting right at the beginning, looking at the historical roots.
Okay, so diving into part one. This level of hostility, it feels like it's more than just a few people being prejudiced. It seems broader. So what are the real underlying causes here? Are there historical structures at play?
Well, yes. A primary structural cause, something really foundational, is what some researchers call the monoethnicity false awareness.
Monoethnicity false awareness. Okay, break that down.
It's basically the very powerful, deeply ingrained belief that the Korean people are a single, pure ethnicity. Now, from an anthropological standpoint, the idea of a single race anywhere is mostly a myth, a construct.
But it's useful.
Extremely useful, especially after the Japanese occupation. This narrative was really promoted, maintained, you could say, to build and solidify a distinct national identity.
Ah, okay. So it's like a national story we told ourselves for unity. But how does that story, that myth, turn into actual animosity towards foreigners today?
Because that myth fosters a very exclusive kind of ethnocentrism. It draws a sharp line. If you don't fit into this perceived shared background culturally or biologically, you're defined as the other. You're fundamentally different, maybe even unassimilable.
Right, the perpetual outsider.
And some deeper analyses even suggest this mindset can go further, implicitly classifying immigrants not just as strangers, but almost as potential future enemies. It provides a sort of subconscious justification for excluding them.
That's wow. But what's really interesting and kind of contradictory is how this sometimes plays out even with people who do share the ethnic background, like Ho Seon-jok from China or Goryeo Saram from Central Asia. They're ethnically Korean but still face discrimination.
You've hit on a really crucial point there. It highlights another layer, co-ethnic hierarchization.
Co-ethnic hierarchization, meaning?
Meaning that even though Korean citizenship law is based on bloodline jus sanguinis in practice, discrimination often happens against ethnic Koreans who come from countries seen as less economically developed.
Ah, so it's not just about blood, it's about perceived status.
Precisely. It shows that economic background and this sense of social hierarchy can actually override the shared ethnicity. Economic power, or the lack of it, becomes a more potent factor in prejudice than the supposed shared heritage.
Okay, let's pivot to the economy then, because that seems key. We know the 1997 IMF crisis was a turning point, right? It seemed to harden attitudes towards immigrants back then. How is economic anxiety fueling things now?
It's classic economic competition theory playing out. When the economy feels unstable, when jobs are precarious, especially for younger generations facing intense competition, people become hypersensitive to anything perceived as unfairness or reverse discrimination.
The feeling that immigrants are getting something they shouldn't be, or taking jobs away.
Exactly that. And we have data supporting this. Studies show that native-born workers in lower-skilled jobs tend to express much stronger opposition to immigration. They fear immigrants are taking their jobs or straining resources like welfare.
And it's easy to blame them when things go wrong economically.
Yes, it's a common scapegoating mechanism. And when this economic anxiety mixes with that underlying sense of, well, ethnic or racial superiority we talked about, it tends to target immigrant groups who are already perceived as being lower on that socioeconomic or racial hierarchy. Think Southeast Asians historically, or more recently, sometimes Chinese communities.
Okay, so we have these deep roots, the ethnic myth, the economic fears. But what turns individual feelings, individual prejudice, into an actual social movement, something political? What are the psychological triggers being pushed?
Research points pretty consistently to a couple of key psychological predictors for this kind of xenophobia. The first one is right-wing authoritarianism, or RWA.
RWA. What does that mean exactly?
It describes a personality trait, really. People high in RWA tend to have a strong desire for order, conformity, and submission to established authorities. They value strong leadership and strict adherence to group norms, and they often react negatively, even hostilely, towards outgroups or anyone seen as challenging the status quo.
So a preference for strong rules and clear us versus them boundaries. What's the second factor?
The second is social dominance orientation, or SDO. This is another psychological tendency, but it's more about actively wanting and justifying group-based hierarchies in society. People high in SDO believe it's natural, even desirable, for some groups to dominate others. They're comfortable with inequality between groups.
Okay, so RWA is about order and authority. SDO is about hierarchy and dominance. And how do these connect directly to hating foreigners?
The critical link, the mechanism that bridges these traits to xenophobia, is often dehumanization.
Making the other seem less than human.
Precisely. By viewing immigrants not as individuals, but as a faceless, potentially dangerous group or as somehow less human, it becomes psychologically easier to justify discrimination, prejudice, and even aggression. It bypasses normal moral concerns.
And this is where politics really comes in, right? The idea of elite incitement.
Yes, absolutely. Political figures or other influential elites can recognize these underlying anxieties and psychological tendencies. They might intentionally exploit them.
How? By blaming foreigners for problems.
Exactly. It's a classic tactic. Responsibility transfer. Blame foreigners for economic woes or crime or social changes. This resonates with people high in RWA or SDO and taps into those latent fears. It's a powerful way to gain populist support, mobilize a base, and turn that underlying prejudice into a political force.
Good evening, and welcome to the Story Radio Station, where we explore tales from around the world.
10-second pause.
Welcome back. You're with Story Radio Station. In part one, we really dug into the roots of xenophobia in Korea, that mono-ethnicity idea, the economic anxieties, and those psychological factors like RWA and SDO.
Right. And now, in part two, we need to shift focus to the consequences. What's the actual damage? What are the tangible costs when this kind of sentiment takes hold?
Yeah, how does it escalate from just bad feelings to real problems?
Well, one key mechanism is how hate spreads. Think about media coverage. When specific, maybe violent crimes committed by a foreign national get disproportionate attention, say, incidents like those highlighted recently in places like Hwaseong or Sihung,
Okay.
the anger and fear can easily transfer. It jumps from the individual who committed the crime to their entire nationality, or even to all foreigners. One person's action is used to condemn the whole group, whether they're from Vietnam, the Philippines, Mongolia, wherever.
So individual incidents get blown up to represent everyone, and that must have real-world consequences, like diplomatically.
Oh, huge consequences. This isn't just theoretical. We're talking about a serious, tangible diplomatic burden.
Right.
Just look at the UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, CERD.
What about them?
In their 2025 review concerning Korea, they officially expressed concern about the rise in racial discrimination and hate speech here. That's a formal statement from a major international body. It's frankly an unprecedented and serious international warning about the situation.
Wow, okay.
It's a
Big deal.
It is. And think about the international image risk. If online hate or demonstrations spill over into actual physical violence like attacks, or worse, you could see formal diplomatic protests from other countries, maybe even consumer boycotts of Korean products. That hits the economy directly.
Which brings us to this idea you mentioned, economic self-sabotage. It sounds like promoting xenophobia is literally like shooting ourselves in the foot economically.
That's a perfect way to put it.
Mm.
It is economic self-sabotage. Look, Korea is facing a massive demographic challenge with the world's lowest birth rate. We need foreign labor to sustain economic growth, to fill jobs, to pay taxes, to support the aging population.
There are actual projections on this, right?
Yes. Experts estimate that immigrants could contribute something like 162 trillion KRW to the Korean economy by 2026. That's a huge potential boost. But exclusionary policies, a hostile environment that deters the very people whose labor and skills are essential, we're actively pushing away a vital economic resource.
Are there examples from other countries where this kind of self-sabotage became really clear?
Definitely. The U.S. provides a stark case study, especially regarding attempts at large-scale deportation. Consider the healthcare sector, specifically long-term care.
Okay, what happened there?
Immigrants make up a huge portion of that workforce. Around 28% of long-term care workers in the U.S. are foreign-born. When policies shifted towards mass deportation or made it harder for immigrants to work, facilities faced critical staff shortages.
So they couldn't function.
Exactly. At one point, nearly 50% of long-term care facilities reported having to turn away patients because they simply didn't have enough staff. That shows how trying to exclude immigrants doesn't just hurt them. It can cripple essential services for everyone, including native-born citizens.
That's a chilling example, and it connects to another pattern we see globally, the link between economic hardship and political extremism.
Absolutely. Look at Europe after the financial crisis. Widespread economic hardship, high unemployment. What did we see? A surge in support for far-right anti-immigrant political parties. Think about the Sweden Democrats or the True Finns in Finland. Their rise was directly fueled by economic anxiety.
It feels like a historical echo, almost.
It is. It recalls grim historical lessons, like how the extreme economic distress of the Great Depression created fertile ground for the rise of Nazism in Germany. Economic pain makes people desperate for answers, and unfortunately, extremists are often ready with easy scapegoats, usually immigrants or minorities.
And the Japanese example with the discrimination against Zenichi Koreans, what does that teach us specifically about how hate can persist?
The Japanese case is crucial because it shows how fake information, completely groundless narratives, can sustain structural discrimination over decades. Groups like the Zaitokukai, sometimes amplified by politicians, spread lies like the claim that Zenichi Koreans don't pay taxes, which is false.
And people believe it.
Enough people do, yes. And this constant barrage of disinformation makes it incredibly hard to dismantle the prejudice, even with legal frameworks in place. It shows that fighting xenophobia isn't just about laws. It's about combating the narratives, the lies that fuel it, especially when those narratives are politically useful to some.
Okay, so given all this, the deep roots, the serious costs, the way it gets exploited, what can actually be done, what are the concrete steps needed to tackle these structural problems?
It has to be multi-pronged, focusing on institutional reform. First off, educational reform. We need to actively dismantle that monoethnicity myth in schools and public awareness, and instead foster a more inclusive, global, communal worldview.
Teach diversity as a strength, basically.
Exactly. Second, we need to leverage contact theory. This suggests that positive, meaningful, personal contact between different groups, citizens and immigrants in this case, can significantly reduce prejudice and that sort of instinctive anxiety people feel towards the unfamiliar. So creating more opportunities for genuine interaction is key.
Makes sense. What about the legal side?
We definitely need stricter regulatory and potentially judicial action against media outlets or organized groups that deliberately incite hatred and xenophobia. There needs to be accountability. And beyond that, a real policy shift is necessary, meaning the government needs to critically examine and likely move away from policies, perhaps including parts of the current Immigration Control Act, that effectively create or reinforce racial hierarchies and prioritize control over integration. The focus needs to shift towards equality and social inclusion, not just managing non-citizens.
And finally, tackling the economic anxiety that underlies so much of this.
Absolutely crucial. We need robust economic mitigation strategies. This includes things like enhanced vocational training programs for Native workers, especially in lower-skilled sectors, and strengthening social safety nets.
So if Native workers feel more secure, they're less likely to see immigrants as threats.
That's the idea. Reduce the objective basis for economic competition. If Native workers feel supported and see pathways for their own advancement, they're far less susceptible to narratives that pit them against immigrants. It helps reframe immigrants not as competitors, but as potentially complementary parts of the economy.
It sounds like a huge undertaking, addressing all those levels.
It is. And perhaps the final, most provocative thought we should leave our listeners with, based on everything we've discussed, touches on normalization.
Normalization of hate.
Yes. When xenophobia, or any form of hate, starts getting treated casually, maybe as dark humor or just another internet meme, it's incredibly dangerous. It lowers society's overall immunity to hate.
How so?
It chips away at the sense of wrongdoing. The perpetrators feel less guilt, bystanders become desensitized, and the threshold for what's considered acceptable behavior drops. Gradually, discriminatory actions, even aggression, become easier to rationalize, easier to justify.
And that ultimately damages the whole society.
It fundamentally erodes the basis of a healthy democracy, which relies on mutual respect, empathy, and social cohesion. Xenophobia isn't just an issue, it's a toxin that can corrode the foundations of society if left unchecked.
Wow. From the deep historical roots to the very real economic and diplomatic costs and that final warning, this has been a really vital deep dive today. Hopefully this gives you, our listeners, a much clearer picture of these complex dynamics.
We hope so, too. Understanding these forces is the first step towards addressing them effectively. We'll be back soon with more analysis.
Indeed. And one last time, please remember, Thanks so much for tuning into Story Radio Station.